our special guest here, Kory Woods, who covers the Detroit Pistons, man's Swiss Army knife, Detroit Pistons and Detroit Lions, 4M Live, and he's able to join us tonight. So we're very thankful for him. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Kory Woods. Kory!
What's going on? What's going on?
Kory,
what's up, Kory?
What a day. I mean, Kory, we had a lot transpire. Obviously, Troy Weaver's gone.
Yeah.
We had you on. We broke it down. Monty Williams is now out today. It has been made official. I'll ask you this because I'm sure we'll get into the coaching candidates. Why today? The draft's about a week out. What went into this decision, and maybe how long have they been contemplating this decision, Kory? Was it a tough one? Was it an easy decision, your perspective?
First off, it's not a shocking decision that they decided to go ahead and get rid of Monty Williams. I mean, you look at the record, 14-68, the worst market franchise history, 28-game losing streak. So it's not a shocker that he got fired. Also, when you look at the way that the lineups were trotted out this season, and obviously one of the most glaring mistakes that you can say that he did right out the gate was starting Killian Hayes over Jaden Ivey. There was a multitude of factors that led to this. The only thing that shocks me right now about the firing is you said is the timing. It is 11 days away from the NBA draft, and they decided to go ahead and make that change since Trajan Langdon got in as president of basketball operations. He was said to have been evaluating everything with the team, including Monty Williams' status moving forward. From what I've been hearing, from what the reports have been said, him and Tom Gores were both in lockstep that there needed to be a change at the top. They did not feel that Monty Williams was going to be the guy to lead this Pistons team, this young core, over the next 5 years. So Monty Williams signed off on the firing, and Trajan Langdon delivered the news this morning.
Yeah, and Kory too. I guess, is everyone in Pistons Nation here. What do you think? Or have you heard anything kind of on the timeline of finding not just the next head coach, but as well, obviously, with Troy Weaver out, who's going to be the general manager? Is Langdon just going to say, hey, I'm going to handle that, especially with the draft coming up? Or do you think they're going to, it's a week out of the draft, are they going to try and push do they already have a GM candidate? And then on the same side, the head coach, it seems like they might just go all through the draft without either one. Is that the case?
Well, I haven't heard anything on the GM front, but there is one thing to keep in mind. They did bring in J.R. Bowden to a front office role that has yet to be disclosed. And before the Pistons even looked at Troy Weaver as general manager, J.R. Bowden was one of those candidates alongside Mike Dunleavy. So that's something to keep your eye on. As far as right now with Trajan Langdon and where he's going, again, we have not heard him speak yet. He has not had an introductory press conference. So there is really not a pulse on which direction that he's going to go. But what you can say is from the coaching searches, the release that the team got today, that they're going to go through an immediate search starting right now. I am not sure if they're going to have a coach in place by time for the draft, but I believe you would definitely want one before free agency starts, especially before NBA Summer League starts.
Yeah, Kory, appreciate you joining. My question, so the Pistons obviously have been rebuilding for a long time. 14 wins, Absolutely. It doesn't get much worse than that. But the fact that now you bring in Trajan Langdon, you're going to bring in another head coach. Do you think that pushes back the window until they're finally going to be able to be a playoff caliber team? Or do you think it could possibly accelerate it just now that they have different minds in that front office?
I think what you're hoping is the latter, that it accelerates when you have different minds in the office. I believe if you look at teams like the Houston Rockets, the Orlando Magic, if you want to go Indiana Pacers to a degree, rebuilds in the NBA do not really take that long. So I don't think this is really necessarily a thing you need to tear it down and build it right back up. I believe we have the young pieces in place, such as a Cade Cunningham, a Jalen Duren, and a Jaden Ivey to keep them around on the star top. So you have young pieces in place. The problem is they are not surrounded around veteran talent to help aid that growth process. It's really the blind leading the blind. So with them having $64 million, roughly $65 million in cap space this offseason, what you're going to want to do for this team is surround them with some savvy veterans to aid this process. And I believe that's the best way to go about it right about now.
Yeah, and Kory, I said this before you joined, and I tweeted this out. I think ideally, if I had to paint a picture for what the next head coach of the Pistons must look like, and they have to get it right, we can acknowledge that. I think you're looking at someone who's just a tactician, X's and O's guy, someone, develop players, but you develop players by being very smart schematically. That also helps develop players. And that's where the league's kind of heading at this point, younger, brighter coaches. What are your thoughts on the report because I know we'll get to a couple of different candidates the fellas want to ask you about, but I'll start with JJ Redick. Just your thoughts. It's more of a controversial topic because he's never been a head coach, but you have ties to Arntellum, ties to Trajan Langdon. And I said this too, as a guy who's never been a head coach, or this goes really for anyone, assistant also that's never been a head coach. Wouldn't you want to go to a younger team, although the Pistons are in a great situation, but a team that's younger to kind of leave an imprint more so than a veteran team where maybe your voice gets lost or you have better players that might not respect you initially?
I don't think really it matters whether the team is young or old. I think it matters the best if you're going into the best situation. When you got a guy like JJ Redick, he has a respected mind around the league. You see the podcast that he's done with LeBron James, where he's pretty much did an even more deeper dive into his X's and O's. And I believe when you get a guy in there like JJ Redick, it could be something good, or it could turn out to be Steve Nash. It could go either. It could
Right.
go either type. It could go either type of way. I do feel though that for this group of Pistons players right now, you want to go somewhat young, but also somebody with some experience. And you do not want to take on another project, in my opinion. Now, obviously, there is the Duke ties there with JJ and Trajan, and obviously there's the Arntellum ties. And it's not shocking if Langdon decides to bring in people that he's comfortable with, people that he has ties with. I mean, that is really what you're supposed to do when you get into these roles. You bring in your people to where
Right.
you're about to go. But I'm not sure if JJ would be the guy for this young team. I will say this, he's a well-respected mind and somebody that a Cade Cunningham and a Jaden Ivey, if you keep that pair together, whoever they bring in, that is somebody they can listen to. But if I would probably go a little bit older, but still younger to the game. A guy that I think that should be on the Pistons' radar for this position is a guy who just won an NBA championship a couple of days ago with the Boston Celtics, and that's Sam Cassell. 15-year veteran, has been through several stops, is a three-time NBA champion. That is a guy that can go in there on day one and say, "Hey, I've done it as a coach. I've done it as a player. I've coached with some of the best of the league. I know what it takes to get you guys where you want to go."
I like the Sam Cassell. That's a great one. I want to ask you about another candidate that's been brought up is the Chris Quinn thing and him coming out of Miami and being under Spoelstra and kind of setting that culture. I think he's been there for 10 years now. And that seems more so to the point where you were saying a little more experience already coaching over the last 10 seasons, being on teams and coaching teams with Spoelstra that have been to the finals and has found success and build that culture up. Do you think Chris Quinn would be like, where are you at with that? Because that seems like a name that I keep seeing pop up more often than not, probably at the most out of anyone here out of most candidates. Are you in on Chris Quinn, and what do you think that he can kind of bring for the organization?
Chris Quinn is another good hire. They call him Mini Spoelstra. The guy has been there for most of his coaching career. Before he went to he had a small stint in Northwestern. The guy has been credited with establishing that heat culture. And what is something that the Pistons are lacking right now? They're lacking an identity. And Quinn has the Pistons don't have a coach. That's a guy that you can bring in there. You can say like, "Hey, I've been developing players. I've been a part of a team that has been a perennial Eastern Conference favorite." He can go in there with some cachet and be able to talk day one about his plan and his vision to help make these players better. That's another guy that you could probably look at. And then I want to throw one more out there. It's somebody that just got recently dismissed from the Cleveland Cavaliers, who I thought really did not deserve to lose his job, and that is J.B. Bickerstaff, just another young coach that can connect with players, that has proven that he can get some type of success. He's been with the Cleveland Cavaliers for 5 years, past 2 seasons. They finished second in the NBA Central. I believe that he shouldn't have lost his job this past playoffs because of his team went down with so many injuries. So that's also another guy I think they should probably give a good look at as well.
And kind of moving away from coaching and more towards the roster, Kory, moving into this offseason, we expect a lot of moves to be made to this roster. And a player that I think is more polarizing than I expected to be is Jalen Duren. What do you think, compared to a player like Jaden Ivey, is his future with the Detroit Pistons?
I think Jalen Duren's future with the Pistons is going to be a tricky one because I am not sure if the Pistons are going to be able to lure a free agent to Detroit with that cap space that they have. So what's going to have to happen is if you want to go land that all-star talent, because I don't know if they have the pieces for a superstar, but if you want to land that all-star talent, you might have to end up packaging Jalen Duren. And as much talent as he has, as much as we see that his ceiling can be, is probably be one of the best big men in the NBA, he did slip defensively this past season, which is something to kind of keep an eye on. So I believe that, you know, that's a tricky one right there to be quite honest.
There's no
Kory,
clear vision on it for sure.
I mean, Kory, you see it on Twitter and people talking about it with James Borrego, and obviously the ties there. I mean, they crossed paths for 1 year with San Antonio. He's an assistant under Willie Green while Trajan Langdon's with the Pelicans. And I've been seeing this too, and shout out to Coach Walk, but he says, I hope we don't become the Detroit Pelicans. What's your opinion on James Borrego? While he was coaching, the Hornets had a short tenure there, a couple years, younger team. He had 138 and 163 record. They improved his final year, but was ultimately let go. I think Sean commented on my Twitter post when I tweeted out his record, Sean Murphy, and he said they had a pretty good offense his last year. What's your opinion on a guy like James Borrego and maybe the likelihood that, because the Cleveland Cavaliers has been reported they like him as well?
I mean, James Borrego is a former coach. He's a well-respected offensive mind. He's somebody that could also come in there and be a good developer. But again, when you're trying to galvanize this fan base, when you're trying to get them back on track, I believe you need to really make a hire that you can truly sell. When you bring in a guy like Borrego, is as great of a coach as he possibly could be, you run the risk of people wondering, okay, how many of your guys are you going to bring over? Granted, again, I'm kind of almost contradicting myself. You said you want to bring your guys over, but how many of your guys are you going to bring over? Do you really, when you're going through this coaching search, are you really overturning every stone out there, or are you just going to go with somebody that you're comfortable with for the now? Because, I mean, if you're going to fire Monty Williams and eat that $65 million, you need to make sure that this guy that you're hiring is somebody that you believe can be the one to take this team over the hump for the next several years.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, and I'm just going to keep sticking on this Monty thing and kind of this coaching search here thing right now, Kory. I want to throw this out there just for at least for the people, because we've got everyone in the chat, obviously all Pistons fans, and Kory, I think you do one of the best jobs in the city of covering the Pistons and the Lions as well. So I want to get your thought just on, obviously, with the Pistons organization the last 11 seasons since kind of Tom Gores has taken over, since 2010 or 11, I believe, and there's been 7 different head coaches. Now, what is something, at least, and this is kind of where I'm coming from, to be honest, just as a fan outside of us working in this industry, just what is like the thought of like, hey, we can trust them to make this move. They've made this move now. This is the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th head coach now, and reset that feels like we're having here in this organization with Tom Gores. But like, where is somewhere we can be like, all right, Trajan Langdon, like we can really trust him? Or like, is Tom Gores going to say, hey, I'm going to step back and let Langdon just let him be great at what he's great at? Or like, what's like the feeling here for fans to at least take a little bit of faith coming out of this and going into this next step?
I think this is the sign of a new era. I mean, I believe this is the first. I believe this offseason, the first time since like 2018, if I'm not mistaken, that the Pistons replaced both the GM and the coach in the same offseason. So, and the fact that Langdon is being given full autonomy to take over this franchise, I believe that is a sign that the Pistons are going in the right direction. To me, it kind of is. And I might be jumping the gun on this, so don't take this to the bank. But it almost feels like with what Sheila Hamp did when she stepped in with the Lions, she brought in a Chris Philbin and brought in a Brad Holmes, a Mike Gibbons. She brought in people to make these decisions, and she took a step back, something that her predecessor did not do. And look at where the Detroit Lions are at right now. So I believe that with the way that Tom Gores is allowing Langdon to move, and especially before an introductory press conference, which I actually think is kind of smart that they did, allowed him to go ahead and make these moves. So when day one he speaks to the public, he can outline his vision. I believe that this could be the signal of a new guard with Pistons basketball. And one thing about Gores, I know this guy gets a lot of flack, and I'm not going to sit up here and be defending him or anything like that. But let's just look at the logic of this. It's maybe Tom. You can fault Tom Gores for making some bad decisions, but what you can't fault Tom Gores for is not spending the money. Tom Gores has spent the money to make the Pistons better. maybe hasn't made the best decisions, but he spent the money to make this team better. And unfortunately, it just has not come to fruition. And maybe right now with this new change, things will be a lot better.
I love to hear that the Sheila thing, and it does feel like there is a little sense of that to where you're able to. It's kind of a new step in the Pistons organization. I do have one more question here, and this is kind of more so just on the offseason, not even with what happened today. And I know we talked to you about it a couple of weeks ago, but when we were on the show yesterday, I brought up how I just feel like with Cade now that the Pistons should go out there, and I know there's not a great free agent pool, but go out there, spend some money in free agency, and as well as go trade for one or two, maybe a little bigger market players to put Cade, around two players in this league that have proven themselves already instead of guys coming up. And I just think it's time now, this organization with Langdon, to take a step forward when it comes to building a team and saying, let's spend, let's trade, let's go all in on Cade and give him something. Is that kind of where you feel like going into this offseason, or is that like, hey, let's wait till next year? But where do you kind of stand on that?
Well, really, if you look at it, the Pistons don't have a choice. They have about $65 million in cap room, and I believe I told you guys this before the season starts. They have to spend 90% of that money, or they have to cut the league a check of the difference. So what do? You spend the money. You spend the money either through free agency, or you spend the money through making a trade that absorbs some of that cap. I believe two moves that if they're able to pull them off, that could aid the growth process of the team is if they're able to swing a trade for Brandon Ingram as well as land Malik Monk in free agency. I believe if you get those two guys next to a Cade Cunningham, who was a consummate facilitator, one of 7 guys last year to average at least 20 points and 7 assists, you're going to see a very different Pistons team on the court. So I believe those are two things that they should try to lock in on once this offseason starts. For real.
Yeah, great stuff, Kory. We appreciate you, man, taking the time. I know you've been busy today. All the guys locally here working OT, you, James Edwards, all you guys, man. And I appreciate you on short notice joining the program. You guys can check out Kory's stuff, mlive.com. Covers the Detroit Pistons and the Detroit Lions. Kory, we'll talk to you very soon, my friend.
All right, thanks.
Appreciate you, Kory.
Kory Woods breaking it down for us with the exit now of Monty Williams. And I think he made some great points. Another underrated guy that I'm glad he mentioned, Sam Cassell. I wouldn't mind Sam Cassell either.